90s, and then I got my college education, returned, and was hired as a patrol officer in January of 2000. I worked the road patrol for about 3 years, mainly in the South Service area. I then joined what we call the SRT, the Special Response Team, or the SWAT team. As a police officer, I did that for approximately 6 years. I left the SWAT team, went back to the road. I was chosen to become a community police officer. Joined the community policing team for about a year, and then I was promoted to sergeant. After I was a sergeant, I went back to night shift patrol as a night shift sergeant on the road. Did that for just a few months before I returned back into the SRT as a sergeant and team leader in the SWAT team. Did that for approximately 2.5, 3 years. In that time, I left and went into the detective unit. I became a detective sergeant, overseeing our general case team for about a year, and then moved into our family services team as a sergeant and ran that. Family services handles domestic violence, sex crimes, things of those nature. After that, I did a couple years there. I was promoted to lieutenant, and what we then joined, went back to the road as the watch commander. Our watch commanders or lieutenants run our road patrol shifts for the night and for the day during that. Was there for about a year and a half, then moved into our internal affairs unit. Was the commander of our internal affairs for 16, 17 months for the department, and then an opening became available in the training unit. At that time, the training unit was commanded by a lieutenant. I was at that rank. I took that position and ran our training unit for about 2.5 years. From there, I was then promoted to captain, and I moved to the West Service area as the captain of that team for year and a half again, and then another opening came in support services. I moved into support services. Support services captain handles a lot of the admin work, a lot of the IT, buying the equipment, getting the fleet, the cars, and a lot of paperwork just to get all the stuff that supports our officers out on the street with the equipment that they need. From there, I then, last September, moved to be the commander of our North Service area in Grand Rapids. It was an honor to be the North Service area captain because that's where I grew up. I'm from Grand Rapids, so it's a privilege to be the commander of the patrol teams over the North Service area, and that's where I currently sit.
Need a drink of water?
Thank you.
So appreciate that, and that's sounds like you've had quite a few duties over the years. Now, have you also had, and you may have mentioned this in there, I apologize, I looked down at my notes a couple of times, but have you had duties as a master TASER instructor?
I have several other additional duties throughout those years, what we call an additional duty. I was a TASER instructor, firearms instructor, defensive tactics instructor, and then I became a master TASER instructor when I was in the training unit.
And just to touch on historically, you've been with GRPD since what year?
January 2000.
All right, and has the TASER been within Grand Rapids Police Department for quite a few years?
Yeah, it was introduced while I was on the SWAT team as an officer, so probably 2005, 6. I don't know exact dates, but it's been a tool for our officers for almost 20 years, maybe.
Now, as a master TASER instructor, how many master and TASER instructors does the department have at one time?
Typically one. At times we have two. We try to get someone certified as a master TASER instructor and then have someone go the next year. So we have an overlap because the master TASER certification only lasts 2 years. So we want to have a master TASER instructor in-house so that certification doesn't lapse at that time.
How do you obtain this classification as master TASER instructor? What were the requirements to earn that role?
To become a master TASER instructor, you have to attend the training through Axon. Axon's the company that designs and created the TASER. So you go to a 40-week, 5-day class, wherever it's held. Mine was held in Los Angeles. You go to that facility, go through the training for its classroom, a test, a lot of practical exercises, designing stuff. They also teach you how to become a better instructor while you're there, when you're doing it.
And upon conclusion of that course and in earning the role as master TASER instructor, what do you do then when you go back to your department with that training?
With that classification inside the Grand Rapids Police Department, I train TASER instructors for the department. And then those TASER instructors instruct the officers in the classroom environment how to properly use the weapon on their belt.
Now, sir, did you mention you've also been, was it commander of the Internal Affairs Division for a year or two?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a significant amount of familiarity with GRPD training and in overall use of force policies and practices that were in place on or prior to April 4 of 2022?
I do.
And do you have a significant amount of familiarity with GRPD TASER instruction and practices on and prior to April 4, 2022?
I do.
At this time, I would move to have Captain McKersie recognized as an expert in a couple of things: GRPD training, policies, practices with regards to the TASER device, and training, policies, and practices of GRPD related to use of force.
No objection.
All right, so he shall be considered an expert in those fields.
And when I say use of force, in just the general overall policies of GRPD related.
Yes, sir.
To the general duties as far as automobile stops and the basic performance and policies involving those matters.
Yes, sir.
So, but he's an expert in training policies and practices regarding TASER.
TASER, use of force, and then also just general overall police duties, police functions within the Grand Rapids Police Department. I apologize for making that.
Duties and functions.
Correct.
Any objection to that additional area of expertise?
No, Your Honor.
Right, so then he shall be considered an expert in those 3 areas.
Sir, I'd like to ask you some questions related in particular to TASER. We had another witness who testified about several topics. I'm going to try not to go into a lot of the same things all over again, okay? But just to get into a few areas in particular related to TASER, and then ultimately get to some specific questions about the case here. Now, sir, the defense is calling you in this case to testify, is that right?
That is correct.
And has the defense talked to you several times over the last 3 years?
Yes.
And has the defense asked you a significant amount of questions about GRPD policies, trainings, and just the general practices of GRPD?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you also testify on matters related to this case about 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, I testified in the original preliminary examination for this case.
Okay, and were you under oath at that preliminary examination?
I was.
Now, have you ever prepared a report, a final conclusion report or anything for either party?
I have not.
Were you ever asked to?
No.
You testified 2.5 years ago, and was the prosecutor present for that?
Yes.
And has the prosecutor or detective on this case ever reached out to you and asked you for more explanation on any training policies or just general overall practices of GRPD?
No.
If they would you have been happy to talk to them?
Yes.
Your office is about a block away from their office, is that fair to say?
That is correct.
Now, Going to the TASER, what model of TASER did GRPD use on April 4, 2022?
At that time, we were using the model TASER 7, the T7.
And where would an officer on duty on that day, where would they carry that device?
We mandate they carry it on the opposite side as their firearm, so you have to do a cross draw to pull that, access that weapon off of their belt at that time. The main reason for that is we don't want ever under stress to think you're pulling your TASER and you actually pull your firearm. Your firearm's on your dominant side if you're right-handed or left-handed, and so we mandate it's on the opposite side, so you have to make a distinct motion to go get that device to use it at that time.
Now, besides the TASER on that belt, what else is an officer wearing when they go out on a shift for GRPD for the most part?
On their utility belt, if you will, what they wear is, obviously you have your handgun that's in a holster. You have 2 extra mags of ammunition on your belt. You have OC or pepper spray on your belt. There's an ASP baton, 1 or if not 2 sets of handcuffs on your belt, your radio, as well as your TASER device.
And then how about, and you may have mentioned this, vest, do you wear a vest?
Yeah, every officer on the road is mandated to wear their bulletproof vest underneath their uniform. In today's world, you see a lot of exterior vests. This is the uniform that Officer Schurr was wearing is like this. So that is how we're equipped.
When you add up all of that equipment, approximately what weight, if you know off the top of your head?
It's roughly around 20 pounds, 25 pounds. Obviously, my vest and belt might be bigger than skinnier people, but so.
All right. Now, we talked about going back to the TASER 7. The manufacturer, Axon, they make other models as well. Is that fair to say?
That is.
And, sir, did you have the opportunity to sit through the testimony of prosecution's expert, Mr. Bloomfield?
Half of it.
Okay. And did you sit through the testimony of the prosecution's expert witness, the law professor?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you hear some of their opinions related to this case?
I have.
Did you have an opportunity to read their report?
I have.
Sir, does it appear that they may have been referring to an older TASER model than the TASER 7 in some of their opinions?
Yeah, it was testified to as well as in the report of, in one portion, they considered the optimal distance of 7 feet standoff. It was documented in the report between 7 and 15 feet. And that is the rule that was in place for older model TASERs, not the TASER 7.
And we'll get into some, but were there some differences, the TASER 7 that Officer Schurr was carrying compared to the older models?
Yes.
Okay. So going forward in the testimony, Officer Schurr had a TASER 7. If I refer to TASER, can we just agree we're talking about the TASER 7 unless I say something different?
Understood?
Now, under the GRPD use of force policies, what level of force would the TASER 7, would the TASER be within?
It is considered an intermediate weapon, so that's where it falls in our use of force.
And how about OC or pepper spray? Where is that located?
That is a lower level of force. The OC, that is used for verbal noncompliance, active, passive resistance, lower levels of resistance that officers would observe.
Does GRPD, do they consider the TASER a less lethal form of force?
Yes, we do.
Now, is that consideration in the hands of a trained police officer?
That is correct.
In the hands of an untrained officer, would GRPD classify it as a less lethal form of force?
If an untrained police officer, they wouldn't be allowed to carry it.
Well, let's just go into that, because I think Detective Tubergen touched on this a little bit in his testimony, but An unlicensed person, as far as what are you required to have in order for any old citizen to carry a taser?
In the state of Michigan, if you were to obtain a taser, you need the licensing, like a concealed permit, as well as the training and certification form for
Okay.
that device.
And is that whether the battery's in it, no probes, no anything within the device, are you still required to have that licensing to even touch the device by law?
Yeah.
And what's the classification of an offense if the person does not have that licensing?
That would be a felony in the state of Michigan.
Now, I'm going to ask you, I'd like to get into some of the TASER training, but just backing up a little bit, okay, because I can't recall how much this was discussed, but just to give the jury a little bit of context as far as training goes. When an officer's hired into Grand Rapids Police Department, what's their initial endeavor, or what do they first get involved with?
Right. We either send people to the academy to get their state certification, or they put themselves through the state certification. So then they are considered a certifiable police officer.
I don't mean to cut you off there, but what's their state certification?
State certification is a 15 to 17 week course, or sometimes in some colleges it's spread out over 2 years, but it is the certification through MCOLS, the Michigan Commission of Law Enforcement Standards.
And what is MCOLS just in general? Does MCOLS also have standards that every police department is required to follow or abide by?
Yes, MCOLS sets the standards, the basic standards of what a police officer needs to be certified in to hold the status of a police officer.
And is GRPD certified or accredited, or do they follow MCOLS standards?
Yes.
What do you say what MCOS stands for?
Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to say the whole thing every time. No more MCOLS.
I apologize.
No, I'm just joking. Let's stick with MCOLS. Now, once cut you off, after the person goes to an MCOLS certified academy, and then what?
When we hire that individual, we put them through either a 6-week or an 8-week orientation. Sometimes we shorten it if it's a small class. If it's a bigger class, it's typically an 8-week class. Inside there, we now train on how the Grand Rapids Police Department does our policies, procedures, manual of conduct, and our use of force. We certify them in the TASER. Obviously, we certify them with our firearms. We certify them with every tool that they have in their belt, certify them with their pepper spray. We go over how to do traffic stops. We go over how to do contact and cover. We go over, how to police a burglary report, how to police a CSC, how to police domestic violence. And then after that 8 weeks, we swear them in as an officer for the Grand Rapids Police Department. After the swearing in ceremony, they go into our field training program. It's a 16-week program at minimum that they go into, and it's divided up into 4 steps. Each step, the trainee is always partnered with a field training officer. And on each step, their level of work that they're supposed to do gets bigger. It starts off at like 25%, then it's 55%, then it's almost 100%. And then like the last 4 weeks is they're like shadowed by their FTO to see if they can do the job appropriately. And during that time, that's documented, their mistakes, their successes, and what training was needed to improve skill sets here and there to make sure that they are good and on a solid basis to move on and go on to solo patrol.
Okay. Now, just going back to TASER training, where is the officer initially trained on TASER usage?
During our 8-week orientation.
Okay. And then how about after they're done with the 8 week? Is there continued
We
training?
have annual recertification of the TASER device every year built into our training programs.
And is that just only the department that requires that, or does the manufacturer? I can't recall.
I believe it's the manufacturer's policy to recertify every device, or every officer with that device.
Now, when you instruct the officer, going all the way back to the 8-week in-house, does the manufacturer provide the department with materials that the department then uses to train the officer?
Yes, we are mandated by the manufacturer to use the most up-to-date version or PowerPoint that they provide to us to go over the slides and educate the individual on how the device works, basic understanding of electricity. I believe you heard from Brian Childs from Axon explain some of that stuff. We go over all that in detail, and then we go through the practical exercises, practice just pulling it out of the holster, arming it, aiming it, how it works, the laser, the light, the nomenclature of the device. And then we put them through real life scenarios, simulated real life scenarios, with role players. Role players wear protective suits, and they have certain training cartridges that we can use that are safe to do so you're not getting tased during them. It would just be for like target location on an individual in certain environments, when to use a taser, when not to use a taser, those things.
Now, are the officers then tested to assure their understanding of the taser?
Yes, there is a written test as a part of their initial certification.
Now, we heard from Mr. Childs already, but just to confirm, are the, on the topic of warnings that's given by the manufacturer, are those warnings forwarded on to the actual officer who's going to use the device?
Yeah, they are presented with the same warnings that are in the PowerPoint, and they're gone over in that training.
And just in general, what are officers taught about the TASER device and its capabilities?
They are taught, and it's clearly stated in the PowerPoint, that the TASER device is a serious weapon and should be treated as such at all times.
At all times?
At all times.
And are there any warnings as far as the capability of the device to cause injury or death?
Yes, there are a few throughout the PowerPoint that claim that this device can cause serious injury or death.
Try not to go over everything that Mr. Childs already explained, but just in general, this TASER 7 device, how many cartridges could that hold?
It was equipped with 2 cartridges.
And can you give us just one more snapshot of deploying a cartridge and what that does?
Yeah, the device is equipped with 2 cartridges at that time. And there is a close quarters cartridge and a standoff cartridges. We went with one of each. So the close quarter cartridge is in bay 1 and the standoff cartridge is in bay 2. Bay 1 means if you pull the trigger, that's the first probes that are going to go out. Close quarters has a 12-degree spread. So if I use my fingers, the top one is straight, like Mr. Childs says. The bottom one's at a 12-degree angle down. It's designed for that close range deployment to get that optimal 12-inch spread for potential neuromuscular incapacitation at that time. The second cartridge is called a standoff cartridge that has a 3.5-degree spread. So obviously the spread is minimized. So you can do it from a further distance of that individual and still try to obtain that 12-inch spread if the probes hit that individual.
And if I could just approach the witness, Your Honor, with People's Exhibit number 23. Sometimes it's a little easier to have the device in your hand.
No problem. Thank you.
But we've already admitted that. Does that appear to be a TASER 7
Yes, it does.
without the battery in it or any probes?
There is no battery. There are 2 cartridges in here, but no probes in it.
Okay. So that actually has the cartridges on there.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
push this top button, they come out,
All right.
and you can see the difference. One clearly states 12 on it, the other one's 3.5. They also have it designed by color, so you know which one you're putting in the proper location.
Now, does Axon warn, and then you in turn warn the officers that you should avoid using the TASER on certain parts of the body?
Yes.
And are the trainees taught that if you administer the device on sensitive areas of the body, that in and of itself could cause serious injury or perhaps even death?
Correct.
Can you just list I'm not going to ask you in depth since Mr. Childs went through quite a bit, but just in general, what are those areas that officers are trained to avoid?
Yeah, obviously, and you saw in the pictures of the green little dummy, whatever, the yellow area of the head, the neck, and the chest, the heart to dart thing. So the preferred areas are the green, so the extremities, the large muscle groups of your legs, your entire back. But we want you to avoid the head because of the eyes. You know, we're sending a probe that has a straightened out fish hook. We're avoiding the neck area of the individuals, as well as trying to avoid directly over top of the heart, as well as the genitals. I don't want to forget that.
All right. And even after both cartridges are deployed, okay, and the probes are out there, the 5 seconds passes, does that device have the ability to re-energize the probes and even the wires?
Yeah, if both probes are deployed into the field, the arena, or whatever you want to call it, you could re-pull the trigger and activate all 4 probes as well as the wires, or you could hit the arc switch on either side. It's ambidextrous, which has been pointed out.
And sir, I was going to go through the voluntary. Our officers provided the opportunity to have a voluntary tasing, or recruits actually, back during the 8-week.
Yes, they are.
And we already had a witness testify and go through some of the video on that, so I don't want to necessarily go through it all over again, but is that required, or that the trainee take that on?
It is not required, it's encouraged. We want them to understand the capabilities of this device and feel what neuromuscular incapacitation is. We also want them experience that when you are experiencing NMI, if I can use the shorter version,
Please.
That you can still hear commands from the person that is tasing you. So they know when the ride is over that they understand what the officer wants them to do at that time.
And is the setting for this voluntary, is it a fairly controlled setting?
It's a very controlled setting. It's a very sterile environment. Everyone is required to wear eye protection. We offset everybody, behind where the probes are going down range, so there isn't an errant probe that accidentally strikes somebody. We have spotters there, so a lot of the risks of a taser is the uncontrolled fall that could create a lot of injury as well. And so there's spotters, or we'll start them on their knees or even laying down to avoid that fall risk. You can still accomplish the same goal and experience NMI during that time from a laying down position as well as standing.
We went through the video yesterday, and have you had the opportunity to review the voluntary tasing of Christopher Schurr here back in his academy? And if you recall, and I can pull it back up, but approximately how far was the device from Officer Schurr when the probes were deployed?
In the video that was displayed, Officer Schurr was laying down. The instructor that tased Officer Schurr was probably 1 foot or 2 foot. It's not super clear, I think the spotter's in the way, but you can tell the proximity was very close, and I believe it was to the lower portion, to his legs.
Even at that closer distance, does it appear as though Officer Schurr still felt the effects of the device? Yeah,
you definitely can tell by his reaction, the immense pain that he's experiencing, and in my opinion, it was a lower extremity, lower hemisphere. You heard that term from Mr. Childs, exposure. So you can see him kind of crawling still because it didn't get that full above and below lockup, but he definitely couldn't use that leg, or if it was in both legs at that time.
It appears as though he did not have the ability to really control his whole body during that experience.
Correct.
And what model was that back in 2015?
2015, we were using the X2. It is the 2 generations below the TASER 7.
Did the X2 have something different than this TASER 7, particularly with its ability in those close range situations?
Yeah, the X2 was equipped with different cartridges. They were designed at a 7-degree spread, and that's was designed, again, trying to get that optimal 12 inches, and that's why they changed, or they continue evolving their product. But at that time, the X2 had a 7-inch spread, not the 12-degree like the close quarters or the 3.5 standoff.
So if we had the video with Officer Schurr, similar distance with the TASER 7 device, with the first cartridge that's deployed, what might be expected as far as where it may?
If you did the voluntary exposure with the TASER 7 with the close quarters at that distance, they would get a bigger spread, more likelihood of experiencing full NMI lockup at that time.
So going back to the academy, was Officer Schurr trained going all the way back to the academy, I call it the academy,
Right.
that 8-week, that it's acceptable to use the device within closer distance? Would that be fair to say?
That is fair to say, yes.
And it appears that even at a closer distance, even with the older device, it still had a pretty significant effect on Officer Schurr. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say.
Now, when the probes connected with Officer Schurr, I think Mr. Childs mentioned this, do you all sometimes refer to that as taking the ride?
Yes, we do.
And how long does the ride last?
It is designed to last 5 seconds.
What happens if the person continues to hold, or they repeat the ride after 5 seconds?
It depends on the configuration of the device, the software, the computer of the device. If in older models, if you just held the trigger down, it would keep going for as long as you went until you actually let go of the trigger. In the TASER 7, they have that automatic shut-off that will stop the device after 5 seconds. But it can be re-energized at any time. Any other trigger pull would send a second cartridge, or if you hit the arc switch, you re-energize the one set of probes that are downrange.
Does Axon warn against repeated or continuous deployments or
Yes.
ignitions? And I apologize if I'm using the wrong terminology on this, but now are officers therefore trained not to have continuous or necessarily repeated applications, to have some limit on that?
Yes, officers are trained, if you're not getting the desired behavior change, try a different tactic. You don't want to keep using one thing over. It's more dangerous with the TASER because you're putting that much energy into an individual and I'm not a medical person, but from my training, is repeated exposure to extreme amount of pain. The body's either, adrenaline's gonna go really, really high or dump, and that could be dangerous at that time.
Sorry, I'm just trying not to ask you some of the same topics, but just moving on. And I believe this was covered with Mr. Childs, but both cartridges already deployed, and then subsequently an individual has contact, even just contact with the probes or perhaps even the wires, the trigger is pulled. Or why don't you explain, can those probes and wires be re-energized?
Yeah, the probes and the wires can be energized once they're outside of the device and either in a person, on the ground, or wherever they're at. So anytime you reactivate this device by, again, pulling the trigger or pushing the button intentionally or unintentionally, it's gonna cycle again for another 5 seconds. So that energy is out there.
Now, even if both cartridges are deployed, I know we've talked about this, but does the device still have a drive stun capability?
Yes, it does.
And are GRPD officers trained on how to administer that?
Yes, they are.
And are the materials from Axon, as far as warnings about drive stun, are those forwarded on to the trainee or the
Yes,
officer?
they are discussed.
And is it warned to officers that drive stun alone to sensitive areas can cause serious injury or death?
Yes, it's the material, and we go over it.
Now, sir, were you able to listen to the testimony of the prosecution's expert, the law professor?
Yes, I was.
Mr. Stoughton? And he characterized did you hear him characterize a drive stun to a thumb?
I did hear that.
Do you have kids?
I do?
You let their kids play with their thumbs in their hands, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Would you let your kids, untrained in particular, play with a drive stun?
First off, it would be illegal for me to do that. But no, I would not. Absolutely not.
You mentioned continuous pain and how the person may dump. Now, what if somebody, as far as the drive stun function, somebody who's depleted, exhausted, a continuous drive stun, could that have some type of effect on them in this dump?
Yes, it could be. Yeah, if a person is exhausted, that a level of pain would be dangerous.
Have you been drive stunned before?
I have.
And is there anything that you characterize the pain to, or other folks that
Yeah,
have had
it's
it before?
commonly perceived as a blowtorch. It is extreme amount of pain. It's localized pain, but it is unbelievably painful. So if you were to press a blowtorch against your skin, you'd want to get away from it as fast as you could.
A Grand Rapids Police Department officer, and we'll stick with the drive stun function. When is a Grand Rapids police officer trained to use the drive stun? How?
The drive stun capabilities are primarily used for a third point of contact, to close the circuit of, if you deploy 2 probes and one misses, you can touch them with the device activated in another spot on their body to close the loop, close the circuit, so the energy goes through the top probe, through the person, and then to the end of the device, and then that could create the neuromuscular incapacitation.
I'm gonna stop here and take a break, for about 15 minutes. So, jurors, so we'll come back at 10:35. Meanwhile, jurors, please leave your notes upside down in your chairs, and remember to not discuss the case with each other or anyone else. Also, please all continue to avoid access to news reports about this case in the media or in social media. We'll see you back in 15. Thank you. You may be seated. And I wanted to state for the record that I did notice one of the jurors raise their hand and ask, kind of like, wanted a break. So it was about the time I was going to break anyhow. So I just wanted to make that clear for the record, because I did kind of motion like, yes, we'll take a break. So with that, we will be in recess until 10:35.
Judge, before we begin, did you want to put that one question on the record that you didn't ask?
Yes, I'll do that at this time. So the one juror had a question of the witness before this witness of Captain Cyber. The question was, would GRPD policies be the governing policy to deem an individual a reasonable officer in this incident, and how it played out? I did not ask the question because I did not believe it appropriate for that particular witness to answer that question. In addition, I will instruct the jury on what policy/law they are to use to deem the defendant reasonable or not. So I will instruct them. I didn't believe it was appropriate for the witness to answer the question, and I also didn't believe him to be in a position to be able to anyway. So I don't know if there's any additional information you'd like to place on the record in that regard. Mr. Anthony?
Nothing to be heard.
And Ms. Hamilton, because Ms. Hamilton was on that.
Oh,
witness,
that's right.
But go ahead.
We have nothing.
Whoever. Okay. All right, so we'll see you back at 10:35. So we're gonna go back on the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Becker?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so now we come back in. Welcome back. You may be seated. Mr. Dodd, you may be seated.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. McFarland, could you please pull up Exhibit K? Make it J, please, I believe. That's it, thank you. Well, sir, I think where we left off, you were talking about the training to a Grand Rapids Police Department officer on using this drive stun function. And just to synopsize, and correct me if I'm wrong, and that GRPD trains to use the drive stun along with the probes to create greater spread. So a third point of contact, you sometimes refer to it. Is that right?
That is correct.
And let's just say, you say third, but if there's even one probe even on an individual and then the drive stun, that's not 3 points, right?
That is correct. It's designed because sometimes a probe, depending on the clothing, or I mean, it still could be in contact with that individual. Maybe it's in their wallet or in the belt or in a large puffy coat, so it's not close enough to the skin. But one probe is actually in the skin. So that's the differentiation of, a third point of contact to close the circuit.
Now, if we could just play this video here, Mr. McFarland. Does that appear to be a training video? I know you've sat through some of the trial. It's Officer Schurr.
Yes, that is a training video designed scenario to do a third point of contact.
And the music and all, it's part of like a training montage for the officers and their families.
Yeah, at the end of the orientation, we take snippet videos like you've seen in there and provide it to the officer and their family for their swearing in program. It's a big day to get sworn in and become a Grand Rapids police officer or a police officer anywhere. So it's a montage of videos just to kind of remember the training they went through.
I heard you picked the music for those? Is that right?
I do not.
Okay. Now, If we can just play it again, I just want to, when Officer Schurr initially goes to pull the device out of his holster, can you just back, all right. If we could just watch this moment here, please. So, you explained that the taser's on the opposite side of his dominant hand, is that right?
That is correct.
And did you see him attempting to get the device out of the holster?
I did.
And is there some type of action it takes to get the device out?
Yeah, the holster that's designed for the taser is a retention holster, is to keep it secured on our person, so we don't get it taken away from us. But it takes some practice because there's retention methods on it. This one, I believe, has a two-step. It has a thumb snap as well as a hood. So you gotta break the snap and then roll the hood and pull the device out. And even pulling the device out, if you're pulling the device out at a weird angle, it can get hung up inside the holster. It's very similar training, because this looks like a gun, it's very similar to our guns. Our guns have retention holsters. And if you break all the retention methods but still pull it out on a weird angle, it can get stuck, and you can see officers kind of doing that jerky motion.
And is the model on that 2015, was that the TASER X2 model?
Yes.
And the device, the TASER 7, did that have a holster of its own?
Yes, it has, because the device is obviously molded different, and these holsters are molded to fit the tight around the weapon, so it's a different holster for the TASER 7.
Okay. Could you just play the probe deployment here if it hasn't already gone? Stop. How far was the device from that dummy when Officer Schurr deployed the probes?
I would estimate about 6 inches, maybe 8 inches, right around there.
Was Officer Schurr trained that that's an appropriate distance to use that device?
Yes.
Because we're talking somehow, this trial's turned a lot into different policies, okay? There's a lot of different policies and theories around the country, is that fair to say?
Correct.
And the acronyms go on forever, right? As far as all these different bodies throughout the country on police practices.
Yes.
And Police Magazine and all sorts of other literature out there on police practices.
That is correct.
Now, to this officer right here, is he trained on every different policy in every magazine around the country?
No, he is trained to our Grand Rapids standards.
So if some magazine or some other entity around the country, some other department in New Mexico or South Carolina says, you shouldn't do this, is he expected to know that?
He is not.
Is he expected to know what he's trained?
He's expected to perform to our training standards that we give him
In your policies,
in our policies.
in your common practices.
Yes.
Not every common practice is written in all these policies. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
So even if there's not policy on certain, whether you can or cannot do this, there's just a lot of generally accepted practices within your department.
Yeah.
And can some of those generally accepted practices on the mind of Officer Schurr differ from all these other bodies out there?
Correct.
Now, just concluding somewhat here, okay, on the TASER topics. But TASER, Axon warns, I think you've already acknowledged, the TASER is a serious weapon, should be treated as such at all times.
At all times, yes.
And can that be even after both cartridges are deployed?
Yes.
Because I believe, as Mr. Childs discussed as well, does the device have the ability to re-energize?
Yes.
Does it still have the drive stun function?
Yes.
Can the person still experience NMI?
Yes.
Now, there's been some discussion as far, is weapon retention a common topic?
Yes.
But Officer Schurr is also trained, is it true that Officer Schurr is also trained that he can use a device like the TASER within arm's length of an individual?
Yes. And to clarify that video, the reason we're looking and designed that video that way, or that training scenario, is if you are up close to that individual that you have to use a TASER on, we know it's gonna be a close probe deployment, so it's not gonna get that NMI. So then he moves to a different part of the body to get a bigger circuit, because it's smart enough to know that these two probes happen to be 1 inch or 2 inches apart, but then there's another spot on the body. It creates a bigger circuit, getting the large muscle groups and potentially creating NMI.
And is that something that officers are able to achieve out in the field?
Yes.
As far as close probe, follow-up with the drive stun, that's something that officers do out in the field.
Correct.
Are you aware of whether prior to April 4 of 2022, whether this officer was successful in a similar close probe with follow-up?
I am not aware of that, but I know it happens.
Okay, we'll get that with a different witness perhaps, so thank you. Now I want to get to the topic of April 4 and the encounter here. Now, have you had the opportunity to review the videos from this case?
Yes, I have.
How many times approximately?
A few dozen.
Do you feel comfortable, familiar enough with the content of those videos to answer some questions? And I don't even think I necessarily need to pull up the video at this point, but do you feel confident enough, have enough knowledge to answer some questions on that?
I do.
When you go back to do an evaluation of an officer, their decision to use force or handle a certain situation, how do you gauge that? How do you judge assessing an officer's actions?
Obviously, we need to review all the videos that are attached to that incident. We got to review the police reports, the use of force reports, going along with that information. And we have to view it in real time, at that time, not information. I know you've heard this before, not hindsight. As I sit in my office on a Monday morning looking at, what happened over the weekend, I have to put myself in that lens of what's going on at that moment. What information do I know that they know at that time? The totality of the circumstances of what's going on, the individuals. I believe you were presented earlier, a whole list of totality of circumstances, that could have a benefit or could have an explanation of why they went this way and why they went that way. Anywhere from the size differential of the officer to the person, the weather, the type of resistance, all of those things all combined. And then we do a review of, was it within policy? Was it within following training at that time?
Does the officer always have to use the best tactic or make the best decision in that moment to still be deemed reasonable?
No.
Does it depend on the circumstances? Is that what you're explaining?
Yeah, it is a very dynamic, evolving event. So there's a lot of things that go into that factor. We have to weigh that stuff in judging the reasonableness of that action.
Now, since we've been focused for the most part on TASER, I just want to ask you about the TASER usage in this incident on April 4th with Officer Schurr. Was it reasonable for Officer Schurr to move on to a TASER device in the situation he was in?
Yes, when Officer Schurr decided to pull his TASER out to attempt to use it in this situation, it was reasonable. He's already tried lower levels of force that were unsuccessful, and we're training him to, again, if it doesn't work, move on to the next, try something else. Ultimately, we're trying to change behavior, get compliance. And at that time, he introduced the TASER in that situation.
Anything else about Officer Schurr? At the time he pulled out his TASER, just looking back and watching this, the length of the fight, does the length of the fight mean anything to you?
Yeah, it's a very big deal. I mean, we go from driving around the city in a very calm but alert manner to 0 to 100. In seconds. So in my review of the videos, you could already tell, you know, he was become to a higher level of alertness when the driver popped out of the car and things, you know, he's not complying and he's trying to figure things out. And then obviously he got assaulted. They run around the car and he's trying lower levels of force. He tried to tackle him. He's trying to control him and he's not gaining anything. It's not working. So then he introduced the taser at that time and attempts to use another level of force, use another tool on his belt to gain compliance, change behavior, and get compliance to control this situation.
In the taser, was that a reasonable device for him to turn to in that situation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as far as watching the video, he's in close quarters with Mr. Lyoya, is that right?
That is correct.
And it appears as though he attempted a close quarter deployment, is that right?
That is correct. It appears they're still in contact. Officer Schurr has a hand out trying to still gain control of Mr. Lyoya at that time as he's using the cross draw to introduce the taser and attempt to use that so within arm's length.
As we all know, the driver grabbed onto the device, is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's clearly evident.
Now, after that point, as far as somebody attempting to take a weapon from an officer, is that a pretty serious situation in training?
That's a very dangerous situation. Why are we taking this weapon away from me? Why? What is going on at that time? You know, it's easy. If you and I are fighting and you take my wallet, you're taking my wallet to spend my money or use my credit cards. That's an assumption, but it's not just to take it away from me. You know, so I mean, as an officer, you're taking away a tool, a very serious and dangerous tool, off my belt. It's a very scary situation.
So when the matter gets to a point where, does it appear at some point that the driver is able to have exclusive control of the device?
Yes.
And going back to your analysis there, in the eyes of an officer, after a couple of minute fight, would it be reasonable for an officer to fear that the individual may use the device on them?
Yes, that is reasonable.
And based on your review of the video, no hindsight, was Officer Schurr reasonable to resort to deadly force in this situation?
Yes, I believe, in my opinion, he was in fear that this device was going to be used against him. He would be incapacitated. He's already exhausted at that moment.
Aaron, I guess we're going to object. He can't testify to what Officer Schurr believed. That's what we've gone over numerous times in this trial, and they just, it's inappropriate for an expert to opine on.
Yeah, I can back it up, a reasonable officer.
So I'll strike the answers with respect to the defendant because this witness can't possibly know what was in his head at the time. So I'll strike any evidence or any testimony with respect to what was going on in the defendant's head or mind or how he was feeling at the time.
Thank you. Sir, if I could just rephrase that. Based on your knowledge, experience, the proper rules to judge, no hindsight, would it be reasonable for an officer, when an individual has disarmed them like that, to fear that the individual may use the weapon on them?
Yes.
And is there anything noteworthy in that video that takes place just prior to Officer Schurr drawing his weapon?
At that time, the suspect in this incident had complete control of the taser and had switched it from his left hand to his right hand.
And how about the positioning of these two persons just prior to the firearm coming out?
It appeared in my review that Mr. Lyoya was getting back up and turning towards Officer Schurr at that moment.
Okay. Would an officer, with the training that Officer Schurr had, would it be reasonable for that officer to be in fear that the individual may use the device on them under the totality of the circumstances?
Yes, based on the totality of circumstances, that everything that's portrayed so far at that moment, there would be a reasonable fear of another officer at that time of great bodily harm or death.
And if an officer reasonably fears serious injury or death does that officer, are they required to wait for the individual to actually aim the device at them?
No.
Because what happens when somebody aims a device at you?
Action's faster than reaction, so we don't have to wait for someone to hurt us to do something.
If there's reasonable fear, serious injury, or death, what level of force is the officer authorized to move on to?
Deadly force.
Okay. Just one moment, please.
That's all. Thank you, Your Honor.
So I go over one of the things you talked about earlier with Mr. Dodge. These questions on the defendant doesn't have to go by South Carolina policy, Florida policy. You are certified under CLIA, right?
Yes.
Once again, what is CLIA?
It is the gold standard of policing. It's to set the police standards across the nation of policies and procedures in place.
And the gold standard means that you actually have other departments from across the country come in and look at your policies.
Correct. It's quite a lengthy process. They review through all of our materials, and we obtained our accreditation, saying I think it was 2019, only like 5% of the agencies in the country were accredited, and we were one of them.
So if your policies are outside generally accepted police practices, you won't be certified by CLIA, will you?
Correct.
So,
Can you say what CLIA is?
You just did. I thought he just did. I asked him that.
Well,
I don't know the exact acronym of CLIA.
what are the letters?
You don't know exactly what CLEA?
I wouldn't want to guess right now. I understand what it is.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to listen, but I thought Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. Well, whatever. The point is, CLIA is the gold standard. Grand Rapids Police has policies that are generally accepted by the police practices because you got CLIA certification.
Correct.
So we're not asking them to do by Florida policy, it's under generally accepted police practices, which your policies reflect.
Our policies have been reviewed and to give us that accreditation, but we hold up Officer Schurr to our standards.
Just going into it, the TASER we've talked about, the TASER is considered an intermediate weapon under Grand Rapids Police policy, right?
Correct?
And it's a less than lethal use of force.
Yes.
And even, talked a little bit, switch off over to my PowerPoint, or my computer, please. This is Exhibit 24. You've had an opportunity, were you in here for the child's presentation?
Yes, I was.
And you recognize this slide?
I do.
This is the slide for the TASER 7. Presentation that you give is an instructor.
Yeah, I would have to see the version number, but yes, it is.
Okay. But this is one of the slides that's on there. You recognize that?
I do.
Now, studies show that CWs are effects comparable to less than fighting or fleeing. That's, you tell these officers that.
The exertion of the device is like you're fighting or fleeing. Yes, that's what it causes after you experience NMI.
Now going into that, we've talked a lot about, go back to, they're not risk-free though, right?
Correct.
Now, one of the things you do talk about, sorry. I had it and I lost it. There we go. This is one of the slides still. This is kind of the main warning slide, if you will, right?
Yes.
Now, they just don't give you the slides and tell you to talk about them. They give you kind of a script, a thing to tell the officers, right?
Yeah, there's notes attached.
One of the notes, and particularly this side, on this slide, is the National Institute of Justice, in a 5-year study found that TASER energy weapon deployment has a margin of safety or error greater than most alternatives. That's one of the things you tell them, right?
We just, not that specific.
What do you mean, not, you don't follow, you don't, so they give you the stuff and you don't follow, you don't say it?
We read the slide and go through it, and we don't go into the minutia of who did the study on that.
But you don't, but you say the basic part of it is that the significantly lower risk of injury than physical force.
Yes,
So you tell the part about agencies who use TASER decrease suspect injuries requiring medical attention by 45%, and officer injury requiring medical attention by 80%, you say that?
yeah, we go over the reasons. The TASER was designed to reduce a lot of things, you know, baton strikes for one. They're ugly, they're nasty, you know, it looks horrible to hit someone with a metal rod. This reduces the injuries because A, it's designed to not go hands-on if you don't have to, if it's safe to do so. And then it's designed to reduce the injuries to the officers as well as the suspect.
Okay. And part of the, it's not go hands-on, so you have that distance. Part of it is distance, is having the ability to use distance between you and the subject you're trying to apprehend, correct?
Yeah, it's designed that way, correct.
Go to. Is it at 32 now, Your Honor? I'm trying to make that a little bit bigger. Once again, we've gone over use of force policy. This is 9.9-1.3. This is the use of force that's kind of in place for Grand Rapids Police use of force policy, right?
Yes,
And you recognize this subject, potential subject actions or level of resistance.
correct.
You testified before, you testified back in April, or back in 2022, whenever the first prelim that you talked about.
Yes,
You
sir.
You testified that Patrick was demonstrating active aggression, correct?
I believe so. I would need my transcript to confirm, but,
Would that help you? You want to refresh your recollection? You want to take a look at that?
yeah, please.
Referring to the preliminary exam transcript, page 33, this would be day 2. Just starting at line 24, kind of going over into page 34.
Yeah, I mean, it was contextually, I don't think we were talking about this case, we were just talking about use of force.
So active aggression, that's what Patrick was doing, active aggression in this situation. Your answer, correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that bottom line, but yes, correct.
Okay. So Patrick was engaged in active aggression. There's a distinction there between active aggression and deadly force assault, correct?
There is.
Just because somebody's in active aggression doesn't mean an officer can use deadly force, right?
In that context, correct.
What do you mean in that context? What do you mean by that?
It's not a black and white answer in
Sure.
questions. So, I mean, strictly the way you worded it, yes,
Well, you can't use deadly force for somebody challenging an officer, right?
right,
You can't use deadly force for somebody punching an officer.
correct.
You can't use that deadly force for somebody kicking an officer.
Again, contextually, how many times have they kicked me? How many times have they punched me? Am I about to lose consciousness?
All right.
Um,
All right, and that's fair. I mean, but it's like a continuum. So
Right.
it's on the, if a 10-year-old's reportedly kicking you, you're not gonna be able to use deadly force, right?
No, sir.
But if it's a, middle linebacker with the Detroit Lions and they're pummeling you till you're about to pass out, that's a whole different thing.
Correct.
So the whole idea is the reasonableness, like we talked about, on the continuum.
Yes, sir.
So how reasonable was it given all the facts and circumstances?
Yes.
Now, once again, going to this TASER thing we talked about, all of a sudden, we're getting this, the TASER's taken away, that's deadly force, that justifies deadly force. Where is the policy for that? Where is that?
Again, you're looking for the black and white answer. It's the gray area, it's the totality of the circumstances at that time. So, part of the reason we do voluntary exposures is to know how this device affects you. And so the level of pain, the level of exhaustion. add that to the totality of circumstances of extreme exhaustion after a 2.5-minute fight, and it's not written down. It's the totality, and that's what we're going over.
And that's what I'm going for. So it's not, there is no, hey, taser's gone, you get to shoot him, right?
Right.
It's based on, you gotta take a look at all the context, looking at the whole situation, right?
Correct.
And then you make that judgment call, not on the basis of hindsight, but what would a reasonable officer know at that point in time?
At that time.
Now, one of the things, the question came up earlier, I mean, you were part of the training unit, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think were you in charge of the training unit at the time this all happened?
No, I was a
You just
captain at
left?
that point. Yeah.
You just kind of left, it was
Correct.
transitioning. One of the things that was talked about, you do scenario training,
Yes, we do.
and some of that scenario training goes for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's not for just a couple minutes, you go for longer than that, right? Depending on the facts and circumstances.
In the training environment?
Correct.
Yeah, we try to experience, in the police academy, when I went through, they had us go into a boxing ring and do a full round of boxing to see how tired and exhausted you are fighting another individual, to show that we are not trained professionals that can go 10 rounds.
Sure. But that's part of the training, because you don't know what's gonna happen out there on the street.
Correct.
Things don't happen in 10 seconds, 20 seconds. You may be struggling for a long time.
Yeah, there's potential for that.
There's
Yes, it's a
potential.
very risky job.
Do you remember your testimony back in there? You said sometimes, some of them are long, drawn-out physical altercations on a wrestling mat.
Yeah, we do that during the orientation to show them, what their capabilities are at that time, and to show them, if someone is a more advanced fighter and wrestler or whatever, they could disarm you of all your stuff during this long, drawn-out event, in a safe, secure training environment.
And one of the things you talked about is going through this training is you have to have the ability to maybe transition, if you will, from different tactics.
Yes.
right? So in this one, what we saw, the transition, we saw a knee kick,
Yeah, a knee strike.
knee strikes, we saw a few of them, right?
Correct.
We saw a taser,
Correct.
and we saw a gun.
We also saw a tackle. We saw.
Is a tackle a training thing?
It's an untrained thing, but it happens. Very common in police practices.
Sure.
We also saw, he attempted arm bar controls of trying to grab his wrists and pulling them back, trying to get him into an advantageous position early on, to get your arms behind your back, like we would handcuff somebody. And so, yeah, we had, soft, empty hand techniques of, grabbing the arms and the wrists and trying to pull them behind the back, the tackle, a strike, a few knee strikes, and then the taser.
Okay. That's all you saw in this incident?
Yeah.
And then for the Honor.
Just as far as this topic of try different things. Chris, Officer Schurr here tried several different means of what level would his force have been in that situation?
At what
As
point?
far as the knee strikes and what are those referred to on the level of force?
Those are hard, empty hand techniques. A kick and a strike is where we would put that at that level.
And he tried several of those?
He did.
And at times, perhaps, let's say an individual's extremely intoxicated, okay, can those be ineffective?
Yes.
And if you add exhaustion into the equation, would that affect the officer's ability to continue to try the same level of strikes?
Correct. Yeah, exhaustion would be less effective because now, the human performance, you don't have as much power 1 minute into a fight than you did the first minute of the fight. You're getting tired. Your muscles are losing their strength.
And just in general, to some of these strike tactics, can they be ineffective on certain people, such as intoxicated persons?
Yes.
And can that include even the asp or the baton?
It can include anything, yes.
Because what is the asp or the baton? Is that striking the individual?
That would be, yeah, striking the individual with the baton.
So if other strike mechanisms were ineffective on an individual, would the officer need to keep going through all of those same types of force to try everything possible?
No, long ago, they used to have a 1+1. They do this, we can go to this, one to this. And then it's been decided through the courts, that's not necessary. You have to know what this level of force, in that officer's belief, would not be effective at that time.
Okay. And really, but you don't necessarily have an immediate escalation. If you try this, go to this, go to that, you can always stay one ahead of the next, the step prior, right? Or the resistance or the aggression of the individual.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to gain compliance and to try to get that done as quickly as possible so you don't have to be exhausted, but it wasn't working.
Okay. But if an officer's tried a level of force, strikes, lower physical controls, and they're not effective, is the officer trained that they can then move on up to a next level of force?
Yes,
And if that level of force is ineffective, can they continue to go up the spectrum there?
yes.
They don't have to try every other possible means below to
No, they do
move
not.
on up. Talk some about these this disarming of a taser. If an individual disarms an officer of their weapon, can it be deadly force?
Yes.
Under the totality of the circumstances, correct?
Correct.
There was some mention of active aggression. You don't necessarily use deadly force against active aggression, correct? It doesn't have to be your first resort.
That is correct.
Can it escalate to deadly force pretty quickly?
Yes, it could.
So, for instance, here, if the driver started out with those functions, but once a weapon gets thrown into the mix, can that change the equation pretty quickly?
Yes, it could.
Just one moment, please, Your Honor. That's all, thank you.
Do some follow-up, go into this, somebody disarms you with a taser, so if I grab your taser and I stand there, can you shoot me?
I don't have to wait for you to tase me.
Sure, I'm not saying that, but can you shoot me? I grab it, I stand here.
Again, contextual. It has to be the totality of the circumstances. But could it be reasonable that I fear that you're going to use it against me? Yes.
Okay, if I turn, I'm away from you, can you tase me?
Tase you?
Or shoot me, excuse me.
Again, action's faster than reaction. You have to base it on the whole entire situation. We can't just have a black and white answer here.
So the fact that he took the taser doesn't allow you to shoot him. It's not based on the totality of the circumstances, right?
Say that one more time.
The fact that somebody takes a taser doesn't mean you can shoot him. It depends on all the facts and circumstances. You gotta take a look at the whole incident.
Correct. You have to take a look at the whole incident.
And I guess going to that, since you're the taser expert, has a Grand Rapids police officer ever been disarmed with a taser and shot?
A Grand Rapids police officer? No. They've been disarmed with tasers.
They've been disarmed with tasers, but disarmed and shot.
No.
How many times have they actually been disarmed with tasers?
I can remember a couple times, but there were multiple officers there at that time.
And nothing happens.
Yeah, due to the fact
Nothing.
there were multiple officers there.
Nothing for me.
You said tase and then shot. You mean with the taser, right?
In terms of what?
Disarmed with the taser and shot, that was the question that you asked.
Correct.
He answered, but I'm just asking, when you say shot, you mean with the taser?
Shot with a gun or shot with a taser, either.
Yeah, the answer is still no.
Thank you.
Just in follow-up, was this gentleman right here trained that the taser is a serious weapon capable of causing serious injury or
Yes,
and to have some fear for the device.
yes.
And the prosecutor brought up if somebody disarms it, you said those other occasions there were other officers around?
Correct.
And is it different when the officer's on their own?
Yeah, it changes the totality of the circumstances and
But
the
the-
reasonable fear.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But the officer has, they're trained that they can use that taser when they're by themselves?
Yes.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Anything further, Your Honor?
And I do see a couple of hands raised on the jury, so Michael will come and grab those questions. If you could approach Mr. Dodge and Mr. Becker, please. First, would there be more energy, less energy, or the same omitted if you touched energized wires from the taser compared to having the prongs in you?
It would depend if the insulated wire was intact, it would be pretty self-correcting, like touching a electrical fence on a farm. But if there was any break in that insulation, that would potentially create that full circuit of energy going into your body. It would, like he said, like Mr. Child said, the energy jumps through the air. It could jump through that and into the skin at that time.
And can you reload the wires, or do you have to use new cartridges on Exhibit 23?
No, we would get a new cartridge put in place. So every device is going out on the street has a brand new cartridge inside of it.
So you can't reload the
You
wires?
cannot reload them, no.
And are officers required to take implicit bias classes or some type of mental health or psychology class, or classes in cultural competency?
When you mean class, we have instruction on those topics, yes.
I guess would be trainings. Like
Correct.
are they trained in implicit bias? So I guess I'll break it up. Are they trained in implicit bias?
Yes.
Do they also receive training regarding mental health or psychology?
Mental health, yes.
And do they receive training in cultural competency?
Yes.
And Mr. Dodge, any follow-up from either or any of those questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Baker?
Just in terms of you watched the incident, were there any, did you see any indication anybody was suffering from NMI, or there was any reaction from the wires?
No.
Thank you.
And then we see another question from the jury, so you retrieve that. And if you can approach. Does there have to be another point of contact, or can the wire alone deliver the effect?
No, if you were just touching one wire and the electricity's going through it, it'd be self-correcting, but it wouldn't create NMI. You need that, close the circuit with that second point of contact. You either stepping on the probe or have the drive stun going off. You need that second point of contact, if that answers the question.
Any follow-up from that, Mr. Dodge?
So, one wire, let's say it's perhaps exposed wire, but if you're in contact with 2 points of exposed wire, could that create a second point?
Yes, the electricity is flowing from the device to its endpoint. So it's either the probe, or if the wire snapped in half, to the end of the wire. And if you were touching that and a probe, or that and the end of the device, it could create NMI.
Thank
Nothing further, Your Honor.
I don't see any other hands raised on the jury. May this witness be excused, Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much for excused.
Thank you. Does TASER, do you want back?
Yeah.